So the most important part of the slide is really our website, my email, and our phone number. So call anytime, email anytime. I'm going to be referring to our website quite often because there's a lot of information there designed for you to help you succeed in your practices. I'm going to be showing you little tidbits of that. I won't be getting into a lot of detail on those tidbits, but I'll just be pointing them out to you throughout the webinar. This is my favorite quote of all time when it comes to communication. The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Goerge Bernhard Shaw. And let me get in my soapbox a little bit because, you know, miscommunication opportunities happen all the time, and it happens between our office and the laboratory, your office and the laboratory. And it's really just part of life, right? But the focus of this presentation today is to really cut down on those communication errors. I want to point out and mention that most of us are married, maybe probably all of us are married here. So a little story. So when I come home from work like you come home to your spouse and you talk about the day. And my wife's an interior designer, so she works with a lot of tile guys and construction guys, and you know, so she might be talking about Jeff, the tile guy, you know, and in her mind suddenly she shifts to Matt, the general contractor, but she hasn't said so. She'll say he, meaning she shifted to another he, and I didn't follow. I didn't realize she shifted. And so my comments to her just don't even relate. And she's like, Killian, catch up, man. You know, I'm talking about Matt here, you know, and I'm like, you know, well, could you use words that are specific? Could you use his name instead of pronouns? Don't use he, she, it. Use real names. And in our technical world, don't use non-technical terms. Don't say it or it is the shade. For what? For the tooth or for the crown? Say the shade for the crown is, or they are too long. You should say in the pre-op study model, the teeth are too long, or in the post-op study model or in the temps, the teeth are too long instead of they. I don't know what you're talking about. So using pronouns is like, get rid of those in your vocabulary. Use very specific language in communicating with your laboratory on your lab slip, your prescriptions. It's really going to cut out a lot of headache and, you know, missed opportunities, I like to call them, mistakes, remakes. See if I missed anything here in my notes. I think that covers that. So, course objectives. First and foremost, we're going to overcome common communication problems with the lab. That's really what we're talking about throughout the webinar in two parts. Today, we're covering 1 through 5 for the most part. A lot of stuff in between this. We're not going to be specific to any of these subjects. We're going to bounce around a bit, but we're going to cover those in general throughout today's webinar. And then in part 2, next Thursday, same time, we're going to cover 6 through 10. Next week is going to be mostly material science, advances in dental technology, and the like. So I put together this list, and there's so many other communication problems, but first and foremost, I think missing, well, maybe that's not the worst thing, but missing crucial information on the prescription, script, the work order. And as we go down the list, things are just missing. Lab didn't read or follow the prescription work order. That's probably the #1 cause of remakes, internal remakes in our laboratory and most laboratories that I see. It's just sloppy, negligent. You didn't read the lab slip. So in our laboratory and in many laboratories, we have layers of quality control now, knowing that this is a really big problem in all laboratories. Managers catching those mistakes that didn't get read and didn't get missed. Very important part of dental laboratory technology these days, layers of quality control. We have about 5 layers, maybe 6 layers of quality control in our laboratory, and there's only 28 of us. Well, not right now, we're a skeleton crew. We're probably at about 20% of our business right now. And I think most of you have come back and are, I think all but Massachusetts is working and at full tilt. From the interviews I've been doing this week, a lot of offices are back at full tilt right now for the most part. Just checking my controls, make sure doing things right. As I say, I'm a newbie to GoToWebinar, so I'm not real confident yet, but I will be. I keep doing these. So this is another problem for us. If there is missing information on the lab slip, we spend a lot of time on the phone getting questions answered and whatnot. Probably 10 years ago, pretty much the same level of business we're doing now. We had 2 people to do phone calls and technical questions. Now we've got about 6 people with probably a few more offices, but still there are so many incomplete prescriptions, unanswered questions that need to be answered so that we can move ahead and do things properly. So that's a lot of time and money, pulling the assistant away, pulling the doctor away. Don't worry about us. It's part of our job to help you succeed. But what about your time? So you want to be careful with your time too. Think about that. Sometimes the terminology is wrong on the lab slip. It's something to think about. We're going to go over some terminology and implants today. There's a big implant section toward the end of the hour that we'll cover. Missing photos or quality photos for shade matching, we're going to go over that today. Missing stump shades, we're going to go over that. Missing the due date, ASAP. Did you see that little sleight of hand I did there? Shade info, ASAP means as slow as possible. No, means as soon as possible. Requires a phone call. So give us specific. When do you want it? Be very specific. How fast do you want it? Let us know. Let your laboratory know. Be upfront. As fast as possible. What, you want somebody to be there 24 hours, sit there overnight? You want to pay double for the case? No, of course not. How fast is as fast as possible? It's all relative. You need to be specific. Tell them when you want it. Don't waste people's time by being, non-specific. Be specific. That's a good thing. That's my message there. Missing the doctor's signature and license number. We're a certified dental laboratory. Many laboratories are today. The signature and license number are required by law. Get that on there. Every single lab slip. The work order is illegible, just like a prescription to the pharmacist. You can't read it. It's really tough. We make a lot of phone calls just trying to clarify wording on the lab slip. That's your wasted time too, coming to the phone. And of course, if we didn't call to clarify, things can go wrong. And so many more things. So, checklists are the next section here. Checklists are so important in our day-to-day living. I mean, an airplane doesn't take off without a checklist. The pilot doesn't do anything, doesn't even fire up the engines until he's gone through a full checklist. People could die in the absence of checklists, and they used to. Nobody's going to die because of what we do. However, why don't we treat the checklists that are available? And this is our laboratory's checklist. It looks like so many others. It's got a lot of information. If you download the attachments, if you haven't done so, or if you don't care to do so, you can find them at our website. Those are all our website as well. They're a little more clear. I'm sorry this is not clear. I've copied this too many times, and it's got pretty pixelated. But if you look through the sections of the lab slip, I'm looking at the large view here, You can see some people are left brain and like words on the left side. Some people are more right brain and like pictures, and some people like to write. So we've got a writing section in the middle. And the signature at the bottom. All lab slips require a signature and a license number. And again, that's the law, and it should be there. We're required to have that on record and keep those records. Read through the lab slip, understand it, and fill things out in complete form, and that eliminates the possibility of miscommunication. Don't assume, just like in the Goerge Bernhard Shaw quote, single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Just because you think we know what to do in the lab, because you've always done it that way. Well, keep in mind the lab has other clients as well, and they might confuse your preferences for somebody else's. That being said, most all laboratories have computers. They can record your preferences and have that printed up right next to the lab slip, as we do in our laboratory. So you don't necessarily need to fill out every single thing on every checkbox, every single lab slip for most labs, but you do need to sign it. And if you have any variation from your normal preference, you need to fill this out. So important. On the back of the lab slip is another checklist. It's your checklist, and also tips for success. In many laboratories also you'll find have boxes with checklists on the sides of them. We're not the only one that did this. We didn't invent this, but it's just a prompt for you to remember what's important to go into the box of the laboratory. Look that over. And on the back of the lab slip, again, this is available to you at our website. Here it is in more detail. And this is a prompt for you to remember what to do for important cases. And every case is important, obviously. It's your patient, and so look this over carefully. Be sure you've gone through the checklist. In absence of this checklist, things get missed. A lot of our doctors don't even know that this is on the back. Occasionally we'll get into a conversation and they'll say, well, why don't you tell me? And I said, well, it's on the back of the lab slip. Just read that. There's more information there. Too much, I know, but if you become familiar with it, it should be a good quick prompt for you to follow. So time is money, and when you don't fill out the lab slip properly, or if you give misinformation, just as a quick example of misinformation, obviously there is no such thing as an L1.5 in the Vita 3D Shade Guide. These are all 2L, 3L, 4L. So that was a mistake. Here's an example where I really don't know. Is it light, medium? Am I supposed to adjust the opposing or call the doctor? I don't know. Is it light or medium occlusal contact? That's just a matter of not paying attention. And this is a phone call, or maybe we'll decide on our own and decide that we're going to make this light occlusal contacts when the doctor really wanted medium. Too easy to make a mistake when you're not clear. So very important. Gingival embrasures. Yes, teeth have gingival embrasures, but do you want them closed or do you want them open? Goofy, huh? Sort of thing we deal with every day in the laboratory. Take your time at the lab slip. It's going to save time for you. Lost chair time, mistakes. Get your message across to us clearly. Okay, so I have a rhetorical question, and this is going to sting. I'm sorry, but I have to ask it. Why are unclear or incomplete work orders tolerated in the average dental practice? They are. I've been doing this for a long time, and I see a lot of this every day. And it's your money, and it's your time. And I'm so sorry it's being wasted. Okay, I was a little too serious. So this is funny. This is a lab slip from one of my favorite clients who's just recently retired. I gave him a hard time about a lab slip that he filled out. He put in a delta, a triangle. I didn't know what that meant. Delta means change. I didn't know. And we were so confused. We looked up this triangle. It's like, what is that? So we called him up and they said, what's this triangle mean? You know, is that a symbol for a shade tab or, you know? He says, no, that's change. That's the change. That's delta. You know, that's a common symbol for change. I was like, oh, okay. So I gave him a hard time about it. I said, dude, you know, why don't you just use language, you know, help me out. You know, we wasted time on, and I can talk to him like that because we're friends, but I won't call you dude, doctors, unless you call me that first, I suppose. But anyway, so he, because we're such good friends, in retaliation, he wrote this lab slip, and we got such a kick out of it. So special instructions, yeah, what is kind of funny, but also we're going to get into stump shade colors. Obviously, this is number 31. We really don't need to see a stump shade on that unless it's jet black for an Emax crayon. But even, you know, if it was dark chocolate brown, it might have an effect on the color of the crayon. So prep stump color is important. We're going to get into that later in the presentation in the program. So supply the stump shade. This is a great read about checklists. If you haven't heard of it, if you haven't read it, Atul Gawande is a doctor and wrote about checklists, how bad the situation was in surgeries and hospitals, and surgeons didn't have checklists. You know, they're just too smart. They don't need checklists. Yet such a high rate of infection and deaths, you know, too high of a rate at any rate. And when they started using checklists, everything changed. And this is a great read. I highly recommend it. Okay, shade photography. We're going to get into this in some detail. First of all, I wanted to point out that my favorite shade guide is the Vita 3D shade guide. It comes in a couple of forms. This is my favorite form, but this has come into popularity too. It's called the linear guide. We're going to talk about this in a little more detail later on. Both are great and scientific in their design, unlike the original Vita guide, which was made up by denture guys, it turns out. Still used, not as accurate, not nearly as scientific as 3D. So, and if you're doing cosmetic work, it's so important to take shades and do them correctly using a shade tab edge to edge with the tooth we're supposed to match, particularly with a single central. This is absolutely essential. The shade tab is edge to edge. It's in the same focal plane and it's in the same exposure plane to the source of light, the flash typically. And I just can't stress that enough. Get a 3D shade guide. Go to Vita North America, that's vitana.com, and get a 3D shade guide. I think probably most of you have that already. And this is what a proper photo looks like. As I mentioned, edge to edge, and it's close up, you know, and we can see the shade guide, the tooth to match, and the identifier, and not much else. We don't need to see the face. We don't need to see it far away. We want it up close. In each case, shade tab is edge to edge, up close. It's in the same focal plane, same exposure plane, and the identifier is clearly visible, and not much else. Same in each of these photos. Shade tabs, edge to edge, identifier. And when we're doing stump shades, any close, we don't have to have a stump shade guide. We can use a Vita guide as well. If it's close, that gives us a relationship in the laboratory. For stump shades, for doing translucent ceramic materials, we need to know. Most of the materials we're using now are translucent in some form. Emax, most certainly. Feldspathic porcelain over zirconia cores, translucent. We need to know the stump shade so we can do a good job. We can control the opacity of the material and how we block out the darker stump shades. If they're lighter, we need to know that too. We can use more translucent materials and look more vital and more real. Ooh, what not to do. Oh boy, and we see a lot of these photos every day. And I send out these photos to my clients, trying to steer them in the right direction. This photo gets sent out to a lot of doctors and assistants on a regular basis. And but this is really this is more like the norm. And these are not great pictures. Let me point out why. This first picture here, it's too far away, first of all. I really can't see detail in the picture. It's too pixelated. The shade tab is a little bit forward of the tooth, and it's not in the same focal or exposure plane. Light source is different distance from each of those, the tooth and the shade tab. In this one, shade tab is not edge to edge. I can't see the identifier, but it's not edge to edge. So this is bright and this is darker in that picture. This was made with an intraoral camera. They are completely inadequate for taking shades. Can't see the identifier. It's too close to the lens. This is dark in the background. Doesn't work. You've got to use a good camera or a good state-of-the-art smartphone. This one, not so good. The lip is draped over the tooth, shadowing it. Shade tabs are not edge to edge. They're resting on the lip and not in the same exposure or focal plane. Same, this is just out of focus. Shade tab is behind. Gloves are in the way, affecting the shade. Bright blue affecting the shade. Shadowing, not a good photo. Let me just go back real quick just to refresh your memory. This is what works. These are the proper photos. And these are just fun photos. This, some of the stuff we get, you know, these are obviously inadequate. Kind of goofy. What shade is it? I'm not sure, but we're going to try. So I could probably almost take a shade off of that. Not. And we just made this one up because it's just goofy. Shade tab photo. Not. Can you take a shade off a photograph? Absolutely not. And can you use smartphone photography? Oh, heck yes. So get up close, get a good light source, 5,000 Kelvin, 5,500 Kelvin light sources. I have a 5,000 Kelvin light source right here. It's not light, so it's brightening my tan face right now. You can hold that up while you're taking your shade photography. Get your smartphone out, illuminate the patient. These are cheap. Hot light, get them online. Amazon. It's my suggestion. There's other forms of lighting you can use, and I suggest you get something so that you don't use the flash on the camera on the phone. These are inadequate for taking photos. The color temperature is wrong. We want 5,000, 5,500 in that vicinity. That's daylight. Want to use that. And if you're savvy, the internal software in the phones allow you to do all kinds of fun things. In fact, in this first photo, this was the photo right out of the camera, but in this other photo, I darkened it a little bit. And look at the detail that showed up when I darkened it a little bit. It's a little more realistic. This was a little overexposed, I thought. Maybe I had the light too close. This is a little darker and shows up a little more of the translucency on the line angles, a little more of the internal dentin, and the shade tabs don't look so washed out, edge to edge. Basic smartphone photography. Use your smartphones for transferring. So if you're doing a single central or two centrals, you most certainly want to use photos. Smartphones work great. Snub shades, I said we'd talk about that, which look at the effect here. This is a 0.5 millimeter veneer. We've got Emax here on the left at a 0.5 millimeter thick. And so we've got a dark stump, a dark preparation. Looks about to be a C3 or a C4. And we've got a clear one over here. And the same, clear and dark. And look at the change and the color. Massive effect. So if you haven't prepped enough thickness, let's just go to the next slide, because here we are with crowns a millimeter thick, still has quite an effect on all the materials. So if you've got to start a dark stump and you've only prepped a millimeter of depth on your preparation, we're probably going to need to choose another material that's more opaque. Certainly we could use porcelain fused to metal, and we can use a porcelain shoulder margin so we illuminate the soft tissue and it looks realistic. That's expensive. Who wants to do PFMs? With a porcelain shoulder, using a master ceramist, way over the top expensive. So porcelain fused to zirconia. Okay, so we can opacify, we can use more opacified zirconia cores and block out the stump shade. Sure, we can do that. Porcelain fused zirconia is expensive. We want to use, for the most part, most people want to use monolithic materials like these. These are all non-layered, surface stained and glazed, less expensive. We're going to need to prep 1.5 millimeters if you've got a stump shade that's really dark. If you're not willing to do that, then you need to be willing to place an opaque composite resin over the top of the preparation, block it out, resin of the right color, so trying to be A1, get an opaque resin, composite resin of A1, put that over the prep, and then impression that, send that to the laboratory. Now we can start off with some thinner materials. A little more labor for you, you got to block it out, chair side. An alternative in the laboratory is that we create a larger dye space on the facial, and then we ask you to use an opaque cement of some kind, resin reinforced glass ionomer, whatever it is, something that's opaque, Panavia, and then the open space on the facial will fill up with the resin cement and block out the stump underneath it. So that's an alternative way that we have to work here at the laboratory. Either of those work. Either you put the opaque on first, or you're going to use an opaque resin cement after, and we use that that reservoir, that open reservoir, to fill in the cement at cementation time. All right, little color science. I want to talk about some terminology: value, hue, and chroma. I don't know your level of expertise, so I'm just going to go through this. If I didn't mention this before, but this really is designed for dental assistants and RDAs. RDAs get this stuff, I'm sure. Dental assistants, the dental staff in general. Most doctors get this, but some of you don't. So I don't mean to be remedial, but I've got to cover this. Value is the word we use to discuss how light or how dark something is. So if I say, oh, that crown is just too high in value, it just means it's too bright. You know, it doesn't match. It's too bright. It's too light in black and white. If it doesn't have enough chroma, it means it doesn't have enough yellow in it. It doesn't have enough, it's not saturated enough with the color. And hue is just the name of the color: red, green, blue, purple, whatever. So we deal in yellows and reds and pinks for the most part in our industry, in our profession. And so we're going to be talking about yellow hues or white hues for the most part, off-white hues. And the chroma will be the amount of that strength of the color. So in talking about where we are on the range of color in natural teeth, the Vita 3D Shade Guide really has it. This little envelope here, this little bean shape, is the range of color for natural teeth in talking about transmitted light overall. This is where teeth fall. And so the Vita 3D Shade Guide was designed scientifically to cover pretty much the whole thing. Now we have some unnatural colors, bleach shades. They fall lighter here, and Vita has covered that with the bleach tabs here, and everybody's got bleach tabs as well, so nothing new. But if you don't have that, you've got to get it. And there's the 3D shade guide again. So we're talking about value. The teeth are lighter at the top. Look at the top 5 teeth. Those are the top teeth in the light to dark value range on this shade guide. As we go down, we get more saturation in that color. So on the left, so let's talk about the 2s, the 2M, the 2Ls, 2Rs. So the L is for yellow, the M is for normal, I don't know, and the red is for, the R is for red. And so this is slightly red, this is a little more red, slightly yellow, a little more yellow, and then this is the mid-range. This is a little more yellow to the left, a little more red to the right, and that's how the shade guide works. So when we are selecting a shade, when I'm taking a shade from a patient, I'm just holding the shade guide up quickly, and I'll select a shade. If you can't see it in 15 seconds, now you're staring at it, and now the chemistry is burning out of your eyes and you're going blind. So you can't stare at it. In fact, you need a neutral source, and that's what's nice about the gray. This is a neutral source once you've been looking too long. Look at this gray here. Relax your eyes on that, and now the chemistry is going to come back into your eyes. And now try taking the shade again. So we're going to take a shade on me. I'm just going to go across. I think I'm between a 2 and a 3 in here in value. Great. Now I'm going to pull that out. I'm just going to pull the 2s out, and I'm going to go, oh, the middle ones. And I go, oh yeah, I'm more like a 2M3. Great, but it's a little more yellow than that. Oh, it is. Okay, so I'm going to pull out the ones that are a little more yellow. And you go, oh man, yeah, I'm a 2M. What am I? I'm a 2L 2.5. It's the lower one. It's basically how it goes. The instructions are pretty explicit. They come with this. A lot of people don't read the instructions. I get strange questions all the time, and that's okay. You know, I'm here to help. So, oh, I forgot to be paler and richer. It's a good slide. I probably should learn how to use it. More yellowish to the left, as I mentioned, reddish to the right, where we covered that. And you're going to notice that if we take these, I think these are the 3s, and we take a black and white photo of them, they're all the same value. They're all the same darkness. They just have different color in them, greater saturation. See that change? Let me go back. So these were the more yellow. So you first pick, this is the 3M1, pick that value. This has a little more saturation, a little more saturation. This has a little more yellow. This has a little more red. That's how the shade guide works. Very scientific. It's amazing how well it works for 99% of the shades we see. Other shades we don't do well with, or where teeth are missing. No, I'm kidding. Those are the easiest ones. This is the newer version. It just works differently. And if you'll notice, we have the top shade tabs plus a bleach. These are the top shade tabs. So this is the value guide. It's right here. It's the first one. You pull that out and you go, oh, where are we? You know, so I'm between a 2 and a 3, I think. I haven't checked myself lately. And then you can get in. So, oh, Steve's a 3. You know. So we get into this. Now we can find the proper chroma and saturation here, either toward the yellow or the red. But all of the 3s are there. All 7 of them. Great guide. Less to handle when you're dealing with the patient. So you can hold these up. Nice little holders. These holders can be clumsy sometimes. Like, oh my gosh, I lost it. How do I do? You know, this is just easier. So nice guide. both work well. I'm comfortable with both. Okay, let's see. So just to repeat what I did, select the value guide, select the chroma and use at the same time, right there. And what is she? She's a little bit of a yellow shift, a 2L 1.5. She's not really a 2M1. She's a little more yellow than that. So good match there, 2L 1.5, or is it between 2M1 and 2L 1.5? Doesn't matter, take a photograph. Look at that great photograph. Light sources from the side, a little bit, doesn't need to be straight on. But it looks like it's got a dual flash maybe in the camera. Getting a little advanced there. We have a dual flash camera for custom shades here in the lab. We have a very nice SLR, digital SLR camera. This is a great tool. I have 2 of these in the laboratory. I use it for quality control. We have the original corded item, and I check shades on crayons. You can take shades on teeth as well. It's a great check, and can't work without it. Be the easy shade. That price has probably come down in this age. Maybe there's probably deals. Again, VitaNA.com, Vita North America. They're nearby us. We have a good relationship. We're a Vita laboratory, if you don't know. We use Vita materials for ceramics. And, our laboratory is kind of a showcase for Vita products. And the Vita company comes here often to, do training and whatnot. So good friends there. All right, some advice. We all have difficult patients, and that's who we deal with here. We get it. We enjoy working with those patients. I think your laboratory does as well. That gives us a connection to the outside world, and they have a very high expectation, especially single centrals and whatnot. If you're dealing cross-country, we do a lot of business cross-country. It's important to under-promise and over-deliver. Let them know that this single central or even a big bridge case, whatever it is a try-in. It's not a final delivery. If for some reason it does match the first time, great. The patient's like, wow, I thought it was going to take 2 or 3 visits, which it often does, particularly dealing cross-country when we can't see a patient here in the laboratory. And now in this day and age, in the post-pandemic age, I'm not sure we're going to see a lot of patients in our laboratory, although we saw one this week and one last week, but not the normal. So be careful about that. And I think that's just sound advice. When I heard it, it just rang well with me. Okay, most common causes of remakes, most definitely in our laboratory, it's poor impressions. Yes, occasionally we make mistakes here in the laboratory, no doubt about it. I mean, things happen and we'll chip a die and not notice it till the very end. I'm talking about impressions here though. And what do you stand to lose when you have a poor impression? Tight proximal contacts, high occlusion, crown doesn't seat, short margins, bulky contour, crown broke on seating, must impression. Your chair time is worth $6.50 an hour. It adds stress to your day. You have a disappointed patient, damaged reputation, loss of word of mouth referrals. I could go on and on. So what does a good impression look like? Well, first of all, it's a dual core technique. And you're going to say, well, I don't do dual core because I might traumatize the epithelial attachment. I'm going to see some gingival recession if I do dual core technique. The literature doesn't support that objection. Be gentle. The epithelial does grow back, unless you've really done something with a hammer, I suppose, but nobody's using a hammer in the mouth, so unless you're using Vicon implants. Remove the cord carefully and all fibers, and complete healing is generally observed in a short time, according to the literature, not me. So this is what it looks like. Good impression exhibits a 360-degree unbroken line. And what is this? This is tooth structure subgingival to the margin. If you're not seeing that, You haven't pointed out to us in the laboratory where the margin is. If all you have is a sulcus, an unclear sulcus, we're not going to get this in the laboratory. We see things in a monochromatic material, in dicestone. We don't have a tooth and gingival architecture to look at to be able to see where the margin is. This is what we get. It's a monochrome. So if this stone is riding right up against the margin and hiding it, where do I trim? Where do we make the margin? And we're expected to provide you with the perfect product. We expect you to provide us with a perfect product to build on. You must take a perfect impression to get a perfect product from us. So just showing you the technique here in the laboratory, trim the dot, trim the margin, mark the margin. Easy when it's impression proper. And when it's not impression properly, you think maybe you captured it all. You have some impression material here subgingival to the margin itself. But what about this bubble? Oh, it's my third impression, and it's the best I could do. Steve, just go ahead with it. Well, we'll do that. You know, you're in charge. You know, but we want to give you the option, the opportunity to take a new impression. We're going to call you about this and say, hey, you know, there's a big bubble, there's a void, and I'm not sure the margin is on the distal of this lateral, whatever it is. And you got this bubble here on the lingual, and I'm not sure what that is either. But let me take a picture and point it out to you. Maybe you'll take a new impression. No, Steve, don't bother. Just go ahead with what you've done. Or they'll say, yeah, I trust you. Yeah, we're going to take a new impression. Would you send me a picture too so I see what I did wrong? Great. I like communication like that. And I think you should have that kind of relationship with any laboratory you work with, that you're open to their suggestions and criticisms. They're the ones that you've trusted in making a perfect crown, by the way. Trust that they know what they're talking about when they ask for a new impression. And here we are trying to trim that bubble off and guessing, and it's just that, it's a guess. It's not a margin. And then there are these. This looks seemingly like a great impression, and it's not bad. However, the tooth structure is here, and soft tissue is touching right there. And if I'm trying to, and this is blown up how many times on your computer screen? This is so big. I'm working with a tiny die, and you know, and I'm shaking with my burr, and I'm trying not to touch that margin while I'm trimming and ditching the margin. You know, so this is tough. Just letting you know, I might slip and I might trim that away a little bit. Hopefully not. I'm not going to, but I'm just saying you're taking a risk by not creating a separation here like we have here. This is a great separation. This is good. This little, you've captured tooth structure subgingival to the margin. That's important. Important part of a good impression. So here's some things that go wrong. I talked about lack of detail. There is no tooth structure impression subgingival to the margin. There's no detail. We just have a sulcus that's probably full of liquid and blood, saliva, water. Where's the margin? I'm looking. This one, contact with the impression tray. We don't see this much anymore. I think people are pretty savvy about this. But when you have a pore-fitting tray and it's pressing on, you know, the side of the mouth, and we push it into place in the patient's mouth, let it polymerize, pull it out, what happens? The tray sprung open to go in, you pull it out and it springs back out of the mouth. And now you've just shrunk the size when it pulls out. This is no longer accurate. This is squeezed down when you pull it out of the mouth. So when you see this doesn't fly. This is a crown that's going to break when you put it in the mouth because the crown's too small. You're going to have a broken crown every time, or it won't go into place, or the margins are open because it didn't go down. Here's another one. No tray adhesive or no retention in the tray, separation. Look at this one. This is crazy. So no detail, underfilled tray. Tray doesn't fit in the mouth. Look at the tray's hitting the molar here. All this extra material here doesn't fit at all. So there's a tray that didn't even fit in the mouth. Really bad impression. I just took that picture at the beginning of the week. This is in the lab right now. Isn't that terrible? That was a phone call, most definitely, and photos. So stuff. I'll tell you, most of the impressions we get are beautiful. But you know, when they're not, we owe it to communicate. So don't assume that we should move ahead. Let's think about Goerge Bernhard Shaw's quote. And impression rating system, here in the laboratory, it's something you might want to think about. If you want to take a picture of this and use this rating system in your own office, really the A rating is 360-degree unbroken margin. B rating, nearly perfect, maybe some ineffectual mild distortion. C rating, some areas of the margin are missing a perfect traceable line, but they're so small we can guess those. Not bad, it's usable. But when we get into the D and the F ratings, those are phone calls typically. And at our website, in the resource section, I'll be talking about this over and over again. And I'm running really late, by the way, so we're going to be missing out on some material today, but we'll pick it up next week. This is a great troubleshooting manual at our website. And this is in the manual as well. So you can get into that detail. Other quick impression tips. These are important to me. Should be to you, I'm sure they are. Never leave the patient's side during the impression. Always remain motionless with consistent pressure while holding the tray while it's polymerizing. Never trust the patient to hold the impression tray while it's polymerizing. And always hold the tray yourself in full recommended time, plus 1 full minute. Why another minute? Because, well, the mouth's been opened, it's been sprayed with water, air, it's cooled down. And what's the worst thing in having? You pull it out before it's fully polymerized, and then it distorts a little bit. It gets pushed upon and distorts. So leave it in 1 extra minute past the time. What is it? A 2-minute set, make it 3 minutes. 3-minute set, make it 4 minutes. Add that minute. Take time to check the impression carefully under magnification, just like we're looking on these big screens here. Look at it under magnification and check it carefully. This is what you expect a perfect crown to come from. It's got to be a perfect impression. The doctor should perform the step with you. Pour up and trim your own models and dies. That's a great way to learn about what it is you're seeing in your impressions. Don't just trust you did a great prep. Of course you did. Did the impression come out as well? Better be a perfect representation of it. Last, with the impressions, bite registrations. We get a lot of bite registrations that are full arch, and these hide the occlusion. You can't see if the patient is biting it protrusive or lateral, or if they're even closed all the way. This is the bite registration that we require, and you should be giving to your dental laboratory. Just over the tooth preparations itself, or over the healing abutments, or if the impression copings aren't too tall, so the patient can close. That's a good bite. Now you can see if the patient's in the maximum intercuspation when they're biting down on the bite registration. Very important. And if I could ask you to go to our website after this and sign up for the newsletter if you'd like, and be on our newsletter list. So this is our homepage, Killian Dental Laboratory, and killiandental.com homepage. Click on the resource section, or just hover over that, and this will drop down. You can go and sign up for our newsletter, and there's a lot of information in this. Click on that, and you will see this. Now, there's the newsletter sign up, and click on the resource, and you'll see this. So there's all kinds of information. Some of it we're covering now. You got this in your handout, and you can print that out. That's also at the website. This is a lot of information that's helpful at a glance. Materials we offer similar to other laboratories: restoration types, applications, preps, chairside comments, cementation, rep designs. It's a great source of information, and this kind of goes along with this. This is like the checklist, but it's just informational. It goes along with that. And this is also at the website: a cementation guide, ADA codes list, and this is the EMAX clinician guide. Clinical guide is there, 37 pages, DAX, step-by-step photos. If you're having any trouble with EMAX at all, I'm want you to go there and check out the clinical guide. This should clear up any problems that you're having. And we have, they say, just one little informational article that we put out. There's so many more. And Why Porcelain Breaks. This is by John Cranham from the Dawson Center. A lot of information here about why porcelain breaks. And it's mostly about occlusion, quite honestly. There's other reasons, of course, you know, poorly constructed at the lab, whatnot. And if porcelain breaks, this is a great intraoral repair kit. This is from Bisco, but this came out with Reality. If you don't subscribe to Reality, I think you should. Reality is a rating newsletter on all kinds of products, materials. Sign up for that. And so this is the implant parts. We've got 4 minutes to cover this. We're not going to make it tonight, so this afternoon. So we're going to finish this up next week, but let's get started on it anyway. So this is an analog or implant replica. This is what goes into our models, and it replicates the top of the implant, and it's buried in the stone. If you haven't seen that, you're seeing one now. These are different types of analogs, and notice they all have this common open area. The screw goes in there. The top of the implant is different on every manufacturer. These are Straumann, Astra EVs, Noble Biocare, Conical Connection, I think that's Zimmer. And these are all valuable. So if they come to you, don't throw them away. These are like, some labs charge up to 50 bucks each. They cost us about 35. Don't throw them away, save them. You can send them back in the model. So these come with instructions for us on how to save them or how to get credit for them. Important that you do. It's a lot of money there. And there's different types of analogs. So we've got solid abutments and the abutment itself and the analog are replicated together here. So this is a solid abutment screwed into the mouth. There's the analog portion, there's the abutment portion, and you can see that over here pretty clearly. Different shape analog bottom to get locked into the die stone, but the top is the same here. This little top of the implant. That's a analog or implant replica or solid abutment. Implant replica. Abutment transfer jigs. These little red items are light cured resin. We use those to transfer a custom abutment. These are custom abutments from the model to the mouth in the correct rotational orientation. Let me say that again. The correct rotational orientation. I should have had that written on my slide here. Enables you to transfer the abutment from the model to the mouth in the correct rotational orientation. And here again, we're seeing an analog, and this is the impression coping, which I think you've all seen. The analog attaches to that, comes one unit. This is shoved into the impression. We use a little lubrication so it pops in. We use a little bit of a soapy water almost material, and it just pops right in there. And now we can pour stone around this and make our model. And some of these are tissue forming. You're going to see tissue forming shape to this, and it shapes the soft tissue. This is actually soft tissue mask. We'll talk about that in a minute. Here's another type. That was tissue forming. This is a cylindrical shape. This doesn't shape the tissue at all. It's cylindrical in shape, and now we're supposed to make a tooth form out of that. This makes it harder for you and for us. We try to make a tooth form that looks natural, and you're going to try and seat that in the mouth through this cylindrical shape. It's tight. We're going to talk about that moving forward. Custom abutment attached to an analog in the model in the crown with removable soft tissue mask. There's the soft tissue mask I talked about. It's a little, I should have gotten a better picture, but this will work. And we're going to pick up on this at next week, so we've run out of time.